I'm seeing a crisis in our country where most people think slavery is long gone, a thing of the past, but the reality is that it's occurring in our own backyard. Children are being bought and sold for sex. Traffickers are making huge sums, obscene amounts of money.
March 18th, 2008, she went to a local grocery store and she didn't come home. I feared the worst, and the worst to me at that time was thinking that she was dead. And I thought that that was the worst until she was recovered and we found out what had happened to her. We were made aware that our daughter was being bought and sold for sex.
Human trafficking is the criminal business that profits from enslaving people for forced labor or sexual servitude. It is a modern-day form of slavery. It is also the most under-recognized form of human rights abuse, civil rights violation, violence against women, child abuse, and exploitation in our society today.
For many years, for the past decade in fact, ever since it's been a legislative priority, the United States has been working under the premise that we are not a supply country for human trafficking. What we have found in the ensuing years, in the past decade, is that indeed we are supplying much of our own demand for human sex trafficking, and we're supplying that demand with underage kids that find themselves in very precarious positions.
The misconception about most of these girls is that they lack the will or that they're not smart enough to keep themselves from being involved in this. And really that's not the case.
The average age of entry into prostitution is 14 years old. Then that means there's many young women who are just like me, who were recruited into it as young as 12 years old, some of them 11 years old, into what is not just prostitution, what is a nightmare, really, what is kidnapping and torturing of a young child.
When I was being exploited on a regular basis, it started at the age of 10 years old.
I looked like I was 12. It didn't matter how much makeup you put on me, I still looked like a little girl.
They took us to one of the streets in Sacramento where you can purchase girls, and we were both 14.
At that time, I'm thinking, I'm 14, and a 22-year-old is talking to me, I must be pretty cool.
I believe my daughter was targeted because she's cognitively and developmentally disabled. She's, at the time, was a beautiful 17-year-old physically, but had the mind of maybe a 10 or 11, 12-year-old, and was very vulnerable.
I was 13 or 14. We were out there every day. I was shaped like a boy, very stringy, very thin, very underdeveloped. I was a child.
The crux of my childhood growing up was that my parents didn't love me. The specifics include physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. My parents trafficking me and selling me for sex. The official trafficking began when I was 10.
It flabbergasts me that it was okay. That the people who were coming to buy us, the Johns, if you will, they knew that I was a child and it didn't matter.
My exploiter was significantly older than me. I met him just walking down the street one day.
He treated me like a princess at first.
I really didn't have a whole lot of attention, and just having somebody to tell me that he cared about me and he was there was really kind of the lure.
It felt good to me to have somebody concerned about my well-being, a father figure, if you would.
We use the term caged. He really had my mind at this point wrapped.
I remember vividly walking down the street with him and him putting his arm around me like he was my buddy, like we were friends.
He seemed to be like a really nice guy, you know, and it all turned.
Then days after that, he was raping me violently. Again, I was 12 years old. I was wearing cartoon underwear. I was a baby.
I had nowhere to go, and he took me to his mother's house, and he raped me. And then he proceeded to prepare me to put me out on the streets.
He was a very violent person.
He burned her, he beat her,
He would torture them and tell them if they weren't working for him, he was going to kill them.
Life it wasn't life.
I didn't want to have a swollen face. I didn't want teeth knocked out. I didn't want that.
It was horrible.
I was terrified.
I knew I was in a situation that I was not in control of, or I was being beat, or I was being raped for the commercial gain of another human being.
Perpetrators of these crimes will tell you it's just business.
Human trafficking and sex slavery are about greed and profit.
I asked a young man why he exploited girls and why did he get out of the dope game. And he explained to me that you can only sell dope once. You can sell a child over and over again.
The internet has had perhaps the most profound impact on trafficking today.
Anonymity on the internet has driven the ability for people to exploit others.
He found me on AOL. After 2 years went by, he started having me meet other men off of the internet. It was about 2 to 3 guys a week that I was meeting up with, basically kind of using the internet as kind of one big brothel in a sense.
Nobody knows who they are, where they are, although we do know what they're doing.
He was involved with girls throughout America. He would connect these girls with all these men who wanted to have sex with younger girls.
In not having electronic identifiers as part of sex offender registries, we're missing out on critical data that could protect kids online more effectively.
In California, the current penalty for human trafficking is 3 to 8 years in prison, which in no way reflects the severity of this horrific crime.
It's hard to bring an 11-year-old kid who was taken by an exploiter, been out on the streets for 2 years, she's now 13, and deprogram her back into that 11-year-old kid. That's lost. The kid is lost. The trauma is so ingrained in the kid that it'll take years to bring her into a young woman.
Commercially sexually exploited children, we don't see that as a form of slavery, when both slavery that happened in our historical context and the exploitation of children that is happening now are all slavery. And they're also all forms of human trafficking, because human trafficking is slavery.
Your house is on fire. You need to put out that fire. It's an emergency. Kidnapping and torture of a child is an emergency. We need to respond.
Because if we do or say nothing, the criminals, the perpetrators, they win.
There's a battle. Probably on a daily basis there's a battle, because nobody wants to be degraded. Nobody wants to be disrespected. Nobody wants to be worth that little, and they're not.
If we want to make lasting and widespread change, we have to change the law. By increasing the risk for traffickers, we'll make them think twice before they would do it.
And it sends a very clear message to traffickers that in California, you can't sell a child for sex and get away with it.
What we need to do is bring these human traffickers and other predators out into the open.
People who are trafficking children and women in our community should not be safe or be any less at risk of criminal penalty.
It will deter human traffickers and protect Californians against online predators.
Within 24 hours of this task force receiving the information, they had located my daughter, and they found her being advertised on Craigslist.
It would help us in so many ways. It's impossible to even imagine.
I think having more money that is coming from perpetrators directly to survivors is really important.
This initiative will give law enforcement the tools we need to prevent this horrible crime and save lives.
By law enforcement really approaching these young women, girls, and sometimes young men as victims, it will really create an avenue for more people to change their lives.
Because a lot of victims are being tried as perpetrators too.
People are being used, people are being sold people are being marketed like they were a piece of meat, a piece of clothing. It's time to take the blinders off and realize they're not that there by choice.
By placing the issue of human trafficking on the ballot, we will allow Californians the chance to collectively acknowledge and to confront the epidemic of human trafficking in our state. Only then will we be able to progress to ending it.
Victims need to know that prominent members of California society are standing with them.
This is a huge investment for California because it's an investment in our children.
We are the leader in technological innovation, in cultural influence. This is the perfect place for us to begin a movement to eradicate modern-day slavery. It is our obligation, it's the right thing to do, and we must do it. We must do it.
Can't put a price on a child's innocence.